Good, we're recording. Guys, only 2 minutes late, so I don't think it's worth waiting for anyone else. Just arrive as they do. It's good to see you, the people who are joining on. Do let us know if you can't hear us or we need to talk up or yell at you a bit. Just some quick housekeeping. I think we're now, all by now, aware of the exits, which are the front of the building and also behind us. And we assemble by the playground until we all clear and sound. I'd like to ask Robin, if possible, if you could do it, Kerry.
Okay. Toka tau. He hōna re he kōria ki tātua he maungaungo ki runga te whenua, he whakaaro whai ki ngā tāna katoa. Honour and glory to God, peace be upon the earth and goodwill to all men. Kia ora.
Good. Thank you, Robin. Apologies. I have an apology from Rebecca Fox. Do you have any other further apologies? No.
Jane Davis.
Jane Davis. If someone move that we accept those apologies. Councillor Gear, seconded. Thank you, Captain Robin. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. Conflicts of interest. Do we have any conflicts of interest that we may be aware of? No. We have no public participation today. So the confirmation of minutes that have been distributed, I trust you all read them. Do we have a proposal that the minutes of the Wairarapa COVID-19 Recovery Joint Committee meeting held on the 27th of July 2020 are a true and accurate record? Proposed, Ryan, and seconded. Thank you. Here, Lynn, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, motion is carried. Extraordinary business. Do we have any extraordinary business? There is one little bit that I think that was brought to my attention from Harry, but we'll bring that in the end with Dave's presentation. So moving on to B1, Wairarapa recovery report, and then to you, Dave.
So I'll take the report as read, but just as an overall, we are trying to, so was to look at across what's happening in recovery for the Wairarapa and to see where those holes were, what we can actually do with the resources that we have. And it's become increasingly clear that it's in the social area that we have the most influence. Our economic recovery is really being driven by a central government $50 billion fund, which we cannot put to try and compete against. We can certainly compete for, but and we have. There's also been numerous economic drivers with WEDS and the discussions coming to a close with the Economic Development Agency, which is again driven in the economy side. The tourism side, we can open and encourage as much as possible internal tourism, but we have a limited availability on that. Our environmental impact, we have always tried as much as possible right throughout the three councils to include any environmental thoughts, especially around climate change, which was here with us prior to the COVID and continues on post-COVID, and the economic drivers around the environmental thing and by GW with a lot of the funding and the specific PGF funding that's gone through to Greater Wellington, then came out through the riparian planting at Kensington and waterways, etc. What we've seen really is that the social side has been something that we can deliver on, that we can progress, and we can leave in a better place. So if we can encourage all of the myriad of the social development or the social agencies that work within the Wairarapa to coordinate as well as they did in COVID response time, as a general rule, and get them together for any other further response or for actually just for a better way of working in the future. And if we can do that and do it as a permanent change, then that will leave the social part of our work in a better place. And I think it's something that we can really strive for and have real influence over, whereas some of the other areas, they are important, but we don't have as much influence over as a recovery. So with Lynn now progressing in the Leaders Forum We have Cara Pennington from Connecting Communities joined up to try and bring the NGOs into that group and have a voice at that group, rather than having a group that is essentially too big to be able to control, but including all of them to have a voice in that group. That's something that we can do and make a real difference for our future.
If we could possibly go to the action points from the previous minutes, could you possibly give us an update on how you go with those?
Yeah, so my apologies, because it does say include an update in the next officer's report, the applications to Provincial Growth Fund, and I've not included it as a written report, but most of what our applications were in the shovel-ready space have been forwarded to the Provincial Growth Fund and sit in that office. And I'm not sure, we haven't heard anything back from that, because wait and see. We have little bits and pieces coming out of it, like we have done, that has been advertised and put forward previously in the last meeting minutes, but also for each individual council has their own shovel-ready projects that have had some limited success, not as much as what has been right across in the applications. The Three Waters stimulus funding, which is a recovery fund primarily, has also taken a lot of wind out of sails in terms of the PGF shovel-ready applications that we have had. So it's unlikely, I would say, that if you have infrastructure, anything to do with the waters infrastructure, that everything will come out of the PGF. That will rather come out of the Three Waters stimulus fund.
And what else with the immigration data?
Kim, might be able to just update on the immigration data?
We're a little early out the gate to get specific to South Wairarapa. Unfortunately, the splits only went down as far as Wellington, Cavity, Wairarapa, but they are taking that on board and they're willing to create something as we go that will be more specific to us, along with the unemployment detail will split out across just the other locations as well. So watch this space. If I get something earlier than the next meeting, do you want me to share it earlier? Or...
Yeah, I think the committee wants to
certainly distribute it. I think
yeah.
Certainly, so we can talk to the next meeting.
Sure.
And then point 5 was the correct strategic position, level and scope of the recovery plan.
So I think this comes in with what Kerry has mentioned in the long-term plan and the recovery, where it sits in terms of LTP, and I think we're all going through now pre-engagement and planning out LTP engagement and where recovery sits in that. And Harry might be able to talk a bit further.
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks, Dave. So what's become quite apparent since we've had the COVID recovery and now the resurgence, that the government is looking for councils particularly to look through their long-term plans. So rather than this committee sitting aside, this committee was set up essentially to just keep a light touch on what was going on, keep connected to communities, and then strongly be advocating to central government for resourcing. So it goes a bit back to what Dave was saying, that it's becoming quite obvious that it's the community wellbeing aspect that the government is looking to us. Government obviously providing funding assistance, but looking to us to ensure they're enduring, resilient, strong community networks that can respond in a context of recovery and resilience. So what's been happening behind the scenes is that the SOLGM, the Society of Local Government Managers, and more strongly the Office of the Auditor General, is providing guidance. They expect that the LTP will have the impact of COVID and recovery, and how we're going to plan and support that through our LTP's front and centre. So it's quite a strong shift where the government is literally, or Auditor General is saying essentially this LTP is going to be much a COVID LTP. You also add to that the uncertainty around the government's reform agenda, which is around water infrastructure, RMA, those types of functions. So whichever way you're looking at it pointing, there's a strong need for us to be lifting our combined and individual gains and how we connect Wairarapa-wide, but also district wide in terms of the social wellbeing outcome. So if you had a look at our, and it goes again to Dave's point, that what we've written in terms of our recovery plan is more of a strategy than a plan. It tells us what we want to achieve, and the intent was to be developing a plan that would sit behind that. If you put those two things together, it certainly indicates that to implement the strategies that we've written inside what we call the recovery plan, it's going to need a considerable amount more debate and I think resourcing than we've currently factored in. We're doing this light. And so, long story short, we need to really be thinking about how we integrate this and bring this to life more strongly through our long-term plans. So I think the action is for Dave and the CEOs to sit down and have a discussion about what advice we can provide you as a committee about how to do that.
And perhaps individual presentations to councils at the time during their LTP workshops?
I think there's the Wairarapa-wide recovery and how we integrate that as well into our individual LTP. So there's a role for the committee to providing oversight on what that would look like, so that rather than just simply going out to the bottom level and lift it all up. Right. Yeah. So I'm suggesting an action to come back to this committee that actually looks at what is the Office General's advice, what is it that how does the recovery and COVID response resurgence now impact on the way that this committee needs to coordinate our recovery response in conjunction with our LTPs. And it's perfect time because we're all literally just starting down the gate of thinking here. So any questions on that? It's more an observation, but I think you'll be hearing the same kind of language, I'm presuming.
Can we just check that people can hear Harry, because you're talking quite quiet.
It's unusual for me to talk quietly.
I know, you are talking quietly. I can't see the screen very well.
On Zoom, were you able to hear all that? They're all muted.
Yep, we heard some of that, thanks.
Cool. Thank you. And Marcus, thumbs up. Do you want to talk more to your report, B1, on some of the more specific issues there?
Well, I think there might be some questions coming out of Rod Orland's, the joint committees, and what he had to say, and if there was any questions or any debate that you might, or questions to me, or yourselves about what you might think of that as a focus for recovery.
Yeah. So out of the combined council forum, we had a presentation from Rod Orland, which was fascinating, but he raised a number of concepts with regards to the environment, and what else were some of the key themes within his presentation from a recovery perspective? Certainly on social outcome was the one of the big ones that we needed to concentrate on.
And I think it was that we have a decision to make whether we just go back to how we were, or do we see the opportunities to be doing things differently, and particularly in the environmental space.
I think that's across the spectrum. I mean, it's a reset, isn't it? It's not just environmental. It's across the way we operate business. It's how we approach everything. I think there's an acceptance in the community that COVID has made everyone reevaluate. So as long as we apply that across everything we do, and obviously environmental is a big part of it, because that's what's going to influence our long-term future. So maybe a bit more emphasis on that, but at the same time, just bear that in mind every time.
Yeah, certainly. I think if you put an environmental lens over all the decisions made in the council, then we're going to get to where we want to be quicker. But I don't know whether we have the capacity or how we would implement his suggested change on the environment being one of the key drivers of the recovery. I don't know how that would fit in with our current strategy.
Okay, Kath, did we record Rod's presentation? I think it might have been recorded. And if it has been, are we able to share it?
I can share the presentation documentation with the other members of the committee, but I don't think we did record it. I'll check though.
Okay, even if we can share the presentation with other members of the group who may, you know, that, and other staff who may not have seen it, that might be useful.
Members, do we have any more questions of Dave regarding his agenda item B1, his communication plan, survey, etc.?
Dave, are you getting the unemployment and pay market spending data through?
Yes.
Yeah. Because that at this stage is actually looking pretty positive. At this stage.
Yes. Yeah. Generally, the data is seeming that Wairarapa is reasonably positive, especially in an economic sort of sense. I'd say. But,
even a drop in the unemployment rate is good news.
If it's a long-term sustainable, I don't know.
Yeah, I've spoken to a couple of people in the last week who said there are literally dozens of jobs available, from someone who hasn't got any qualifications to someone who is highly qualified. So it's not that the jobs aren't there, shall we say. The jobs are there, which is great news. It could be a J&L, Premier Beehive, and an accountancy firm as a nurse. So the jobs are there. It's just whether or not we've got people that are able and or willing to do that.
Sorry, just to come back on that previous point. If the committee wants to direct more into the environmental or the recovery team back into an environmental focus, if there are any questions, you could put them through and we could report back as to what that implications of whatever direction that is that you are asking for. Probably more in a resourcing or able to be able to influence. So I would encourage, if you could, just feed that back to me. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Cool.
And that's also just on those resourcing that we are. You're looking at the recovery team, which is trying to do as much as we can on top of our reasonably hectic world, and if we are going to change direction, if we're going to focus on something else, and if you want something more, then we're probably going to have to resource that accordingly. So there will be some resource implications that we'll need to work through if you're wanting to change the direction of them.
Yeah, your suggestions and the implications would be great.
Yep.
If you would forward those through. On
And comms.
And comms. Yes. Yeah. On your comment as well, I had a chat with the eyesight team, and I've certainly seen that they have incredibly strong bookings 2 months out from a tourism perspective, and also an increased patronage from South Island, which is unusual. I think as well, Angus and Associates put out their recent tourism monitor today, and it's showing that 48% of New Zealanders will be taking a break before Christmas, 28% during September and October. So we could be in for a very hectic time, given our proximity to major centres.
Just on the, sorry.
That is one section of data that I have started receiving and that I can start incorporating is the national average spend versus this time last year, and that is broken down by each of our areas, so that one I can start including. I think on average we're up anywhere between 14 and 21% on weekend spend from where we were previously pre-COVID. So
It's looking pretty good year on year. From an environmental point of view too, a lot of that is going to be determined with the lens that we put over it by what funding is available from central government. So just had announced just under 30k is coming to the region from studies at Lake Anuki to Castle Point. So, I mean, again, that's all positive stuff, but it's all central government funding driven. So, and it's put through Sustainable Wairarapa. So.
I was just picking up the point that Kim made, and I think about the data. So nationally, there is data being collected around all of this by local authority, by each local authority. So it'll be paymark data, it'll be all that job seeker, and that's due for release. I think it's Stop Love's data are doing that nationally, and that will be available in September, later next month, and we should get it monthly. I can't remember if it was monthly or bi-monthly, but that saves a lot of people trying to, I know Bridget through the economic development, through WEDS is also collecting a lot of that data. So hopefully it's going out to every local authority. So, and that'd be good data to get. So, and it saves staff having to try and resource that.
Yeah, we had some good reports on Infometrics. Are we still, are they still engaged to be providing us with information, or is that sort of run out? I think during COVID,
we still get it regularly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the cycle is extended slightly, though, like you're saying. Some of them have moved from almost fortnightly to monthly. Now the monthly stuff's moved to bi-monthly.
Yeah.
But it's still coming through.
If I can just raise a point, read the social recovery. So I'm really looking forward to the Wairarapa Leaders Social Wellbeing Forum. So I've contacted most of those that will be sitting around the table and we'll use the opportunity. I don't think Jason or Tito on today, but wanted to use this forum just to, we need representatives from that group or from iwi, and I need to follow up on that conversation. But so this is a leaders forum of those that where decision making sits, and the part that Cara plays with the community networks is hugely important. So she will bring the intel back from the NGOs, those that are at the coalface, if you like, into this leaders forum, and then she will be the conduit to take that information to and from. So looking to have the first meeting hopefully within the next 2 weeks, and I'll follow up with Cara after you've spoken to her on Wednesday, Dave. So, but really good response from, I've contacted a good number of those, it's around 10 people that will sit on there. And really looking forward to progressing there.
Thanks. With regards to the survey, I mean, how we have a time frame and we want to get that underway?
That's part of what I'll be meeting with Cara on Wednesday with, and will be an online survey, and obviously that has its downsides to being able to get everyone information on a survey, but it means it's repeatable, it's relatively low cost, and it will give us at least some information where at the moment this is the social aspect is really a void of information. It's anecdotal and difficult to actually bring together. So it'll give us a marker in the sand so that we can actually hopefully show a positive difference. If there's anything in the regional recovery, is there anything for you? Kate's been involved in the regional side of the recovery coordination.
So the regional recovery was catching up weekly, but that was probably too frequent because, like all the other recovery managers, we all have our day jobs. So we're on a fortnightly cycle now. There's a program of about 12 initiatives, and each initiative has been given a lead, and we are still working through the scoping on some of those initiatives. But I can, in the next report, provide a more comprehensive update about those initiatives and where they're at, if you like. Because we are starting to get a little bit more structure around the internal reporting around us.
It was nice of the regional people to call out our Wairarapa website and stuff, though. It was a bit of a nod to others, you know.
We've got some really good feedback.
Take the feedback on it, yeah. And sleep like this.
That was actually one of my questions was like how much traction is the website getting, and have we had any requests come through that we forward on?
Yeah, we've got about 7 in total that have come through from people asking, somebody's asking for additional information, which is great, so they're redirecting to other sites, but then there are a couple of residents that I've got now collected to have a discussion around because we need to form a response to their submission based on what they're actually trying to get us to achieve. So yeah, that just needs a discussion now. But yeah, it's seeing as we only had the one release of where that information is kept. It's I think the hit rate is nearly 1,000 views, and yeah, 7 or 8 submissions. Yeah.
And there's a comms plan that's been developed in the background that will see that gather up more momentum, because we will be using that channel and putting that out through our various comms tools.
in shaping and forming how that website will be the voice for all things, and we're basically the conduit that just delivers the information out via the site. Again, that comes back to the problems.
We might be able to adjust that rather than a Wairarapa recovery, we'll adjust it so that we can talk about long-term plans and maybe feed off and have key points in it and progress the website and increase that social focus as well. So we're using that as the one source of truth, but just tweaking it a little bit on the comms. So we've got some comms experts looking at that and how we can do that.
We can brand it slightly.
So will the survey be going onto the website as well? And anyone can just click on it, or are you going to really target it towards like the social organisations or business groups?
Probably more targeted towards the social. We do need some more of that social information where we have that void and information on the ground data and on how COVID specifically has affected those really in trouble and what we can do about it. So that was because we have a lot of the tourism data and the economic data and all, who's doing what for that sort of side of things. We had very, very little other than people's interaction in the NGOs and CARA's interaction there, which is great help, but to actually have something where we can repeatable, ask the same question and see some sort of changes, that's what the thinking for the survey was.
So it will go predominantly to organisations rather than individuals?
We'll talk to CARA and see what the best way, CARA and Glenda, and just see what the best way of delivering this is, and probably a mix of both.
It's a size and scale, I'd say both, because some people are their own entity and other people are part of profits and organisations. But I think once the survey information comes back, it'd be nice to have a write-up and a summary as to this is what information we found through, surveying, and then ask the question of other people,
Yeah.
It will stay here as well. But we need the specifics of the survey questions to give us the actual data that we kind of missed the first time around. So it needs to be really tight.
I think if you have a question at the beginning which actually breaks down which category or demographic they are, then it's much easier to pull the data out. Yeah.
And a follow-up question from that. Obviously, the recovery team are all very busy with their day jobs. If we're going to be finding out a lot of information from like the leaders forum and the survey, are we going to be able to resource any actions that come out of that? And who's going to be responsible for those actions?
Glenda has been, so Glenda, who is a joint resource at the moment, is quite keen on using some of that information to try and make her BAU a little bit easier, more conjoint, be contracting CARA between the three councils.
I think also that that's the role of the leaders forum, to advocate. So when you've got representatives and decision makers from most of the, whether it be policing, ST or what have you, then that will be their responsibility, not necessarily the responsibility of us sitting or individual councils to respond to, depending on what the issue is.
So going back to that long-term plan advice, what sort of actions are they anticipating that councils may have to put into their long-term plans?
The obstacle in general. They really are thinking in the wellbeing area, how is council organised, what are the outcomes it wants to achieve, what resources does it expect to apply, so all those normal things you would put with LTP. So just commenting on some of the discussion you just had, this is not the survey, I'm presuming it's not a fishing expedition just to say how I'm feeling. This is for a purpose, which is to say, in terms of, are there any gaps? Are there any, where are the strengths in the community? What's the need? Where are the gaps? So it could be used for planning purposes, which you would then translate into your LTP to say these are the kind of resources you need. You don't an epic fail when we have set up a portal or a place where people exchange information about what they think council should do, quite aside from that LTP. That's a place we want that conversation to be informed and be structured in the whole context of what councils do.
And I suppose aside from the councils as well, what comes from that survey data may help the Leaders Forum understand what the social wellbeing indicators are, you know, where the focus needs to be.
And what the community can request.
That's absolutely. And where councils may or may not have a role to play within that.
It's also when one starts and another stops too, because so many of them blur over each other and they run into, you know, you could count around at every category and things like that. So we really need this to be sharp data collection so we can actually put people in a segment and work with them that way.
Any other comments on the recovery report? That I'll actually probably belatedly go to someone that we received this report. We discussed it. Thanks, Greg, and seconded. Thank you, Greg. Yeah. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, motion is carried. And the next is to endorse the coordination of Wairarapa Community Networks to support Leaders Group Forum. Moved by Lynn, seconded by Rebecca. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, motion is carried. And we also move recommendation that we endorse the implementation of an online survey. I'll move that. Seconded. Thank you. All right. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, motion is carried. The next one is regarding the frequency of these meetings. And there is a request that we hold them quarterly instead of as we have been. Do we have a discussion on that? What does everyone thoughts on this?
Support the recommendation.
Yeah, support it just based on the fact is we just, even if it's via email, we're talking, whether that be data release information, survey information, might be holes in certain areas that we can pick up on and improve on and then report back at those quarterly meetings as well. So as long as the information sharing is still going on in between, absolutely.
Rebecca?
I just wonder if there going to be enough time for us to get things into our long-term plan and that sort of thing, or if we're going to be doing some shared services or shared initiatives across the region.
I support what Rebecca's saying. I think if we let's have a look and see what's involved with the LTP, and then if there's a meeting that needs to be called earlier rather than later, so we're lining ourselves up. Because the cascade should be you providing advice as a committee to officers to put right back through council. So we just need a stage where you've got sight of that, and we work that way. So I would suggest you probably going to need to have one next.
Well, if we move to quarterlies, the fix, but we have a special extraordinary.
Yeah.
And that was the other one, is that subject to extraordinary meetings on
LTP.
but also we revisit that if there is a change in levels or there's something happening in the economy that requires a more targeted or more involved response. Yeah. So, I will move that we move the committee meetings to be held quarterly. Seconder, Mayor Lynn. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, motion is carried. I don't think I need to put any caveats on that. It's explicit.
I was just going to raise something about the survey because we've endorsed the implementation of the online survey. I wondered, Dave, in your discussion with Cara, whether we might want to hold off until after our first Leaders Forum.
Yeah, that's fine.
And if we have that in the 2 weeks, because it would be quite good to display.
Yeah, I was just wanting to get it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I just wanted to get it out of the way because it will take a little bit of thought and process to make sure that we're getting the right questions and who we're asking. So that'd be fine.
Yeah. And there might be some good information that the heads of these government agencies may be able to provide for that.
Who's going to be creating the survey?
Between Glenda and Cara, we'll come up with the questions and the who's. And then we'll work on that to get that answer.
It would be nice to have a separate eye for the robustness to do the questions. The separate way of forming the questions. Do we have anything else that we want to raise?
Would you like me to create a distribution list for this meeting? So if we're communicating outside of the meetings, we can do a bulk email to everybody.
That'd be fantastic.
Sounds good.
All right. So with that, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone.
Wasn't on my,
Well, I didn't see the finalised.
Oh,
I didn't get a copy of the finalised to include it into there to be able to endorse it, so.
Should we circulate that?
We can circulate it.
Yes.
And we can
maybe
email.
the distribution list will be the cost.
Yeah, that's why that wasn't on there, I didn't see the finalised.
Great, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.